Better turn my mic on. Looks like we're all here, and more than everyone. Welcome. This is December 9th, and this is the regular meeting of December. It's 5 o'clock, and I'd like to call the meeting to order. Ms. Beck, will you perform the roll call, please?
Sarah Brock. Here. John Kreischer.
Here.
Pat McKee.
Here.
Jennifer Paoli. Here. Joanna Reyes.
Here.
Jane Roosh. Here. Corey Sillers.
Here.
Lance Trollope.
Here.
Jim Boucher.
Here. Please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It is the mission of the Wausau School District to advance student learning, achievement, and success. And with that, we get our first presentation by Red Granite Charter School. I'm going to just turn it right over to you.
Welcome, everyone. We are from Red Granite Charter School. Our school goal is growing innovators through outdoor education. My name is Emily, and I'm in 4K. My name is Luna, and I am in first grade. My name is Leroy, and I'm in kindergarten. My name is Sam, and I'm in first grade. My name is Kira, and I'm in third grade. Our vision, we seek to send into the world confident, curious, and independent thinkers who will lead a life of purpose, contribution, and direction. Since we could not all be here, let's hear from our friends and what they like about Red Granite. Because they have hammocks, lots of hammocks, and they have toys and stuffed animals and build houses, and there's a lot of sticks being made out.
Go.
I like playing with my friends, and I'm really into is about that log, and I was just having fun. Got ripped by the snake.
Oh my gosh.
There is a snake. Run away.
Okay, ready?
I like about school, like doing like some painting in my right now, so it's very fun right now. And when I wake up at school, painting, drawing, and going outside. Here are some activities that make our school special. We have been working on water power building. We bake bread. Finger knitting is one of our favorite activities. Check out our second and third graders' beeswax creations. Here are some photos of our friends having fun at Red Granite. Look at those smiles. In our grade classes, we have been doing, we have these main lesson block. In grade 1, so far we have learned about wandering, seasonal nature study, reading and writing through. In grade 2nd and 3rd, we have learned about math and measurement, heroes, legends, and folklore, and time and money. Thank you.
Thank you. I thought for sure somebody was going to ask me about my cheeseburger and French fries here.
Very impressed by the details.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, moving right along. Item number 6. With that, recognize speakers and students who wish to make public comments, but before we do, I think I'm going to forgo that. Dana, I think you can, you got it. You got the floor. You don't need to hear that again. I'm actually more interested in hearing what you have to tell us.
Hi, everybody. Happy December. Woo. So just a couple of things. Sorry, I got the crud that all of the kids shared. I thanked them for that today. And anyway, we just finished our ham and turkey drive. I don't know if you saw the publicity. 1,001 hams and turkeys were delivered to students' families in the Wausau School District, DC Everest, Mosinee. We do a big donation to the Salvation Army, Neighbors Place, all on behalf of the community. Rob Hughes has been working at that for, I think, 7 or 8 years and had a lot of donations this year. We just recertified, so you get to see us for another year. That was a big success. And then I just wanted to mention that we just have that continued partnership. Our Longfellow team gets to spend quality time with us twice a month for sure. So that's it.
Appreciate it. Thank
Happy
you very
holidays.
much. Glad everything went well. And I hope you don't pass any of that on to us.
It's day 3, so we should be okay.
As a substitute teacher, I sometimes get nervous about going into the schools. But anyway, I continue doing that. See, you want to hold my hand? I guess not. Number 7 on the agenda item, appointments, additional staff, replacement staff, contact increases. This is to approve the consent agenda, separations, resignations, contract decreases, terminations, leaves of absence, retirements, minutes, regular session of November 11th, 2024, and the special session of November 25, 2024. Payment of bills and budget status. And I believe that is, no. How about if I keep my place here? Sorry about that. Yeah, I better. Yeah, it's down there. Donations to the district, Highland Community Church, Jan Mann, Laura Reef, David and Kim Casey, Forest Park Neighborhood, GPM Southeast, Color Vision Ltd., Milkmaker Dairy. And with that, I'm seeking a motion to approve the consent agenda with great gratitude for the donations.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I need to slow myself down. Sorry about that, you two. All in favor? We got the aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay. Old recurring business. There is none at this point in time. And then agenda item number 9, transportation partner. We're going to have a presentation by Josh Fagut. We'll give an update on the transportation RFP and proposed transportation partner. And with that information, I'll turn it over to you, Josh. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So as Mr. Boucher mentioned, we are here to look at and approve our transportation partner beginning for the 25-26 school year. We do contract for our transportation, and we are in the last year of our contract. We do work with First Student currently. We've worked with them for the last 10 plus years on more than 200 routes daily, average of 170 plus field trips and athletic activities per month, funded out of the general education and special education funds. Costs for routes specifically is somewhere between $3.1 and $3.2 million annually. So what has the process for this been? Late this spring, early summer, we began the RFP process. So we hired a consultant to help walk us through this. His name was Pat Starkin. He's been here before. Early summer, he came and presented to you. He was a transportation director in Racine, and then he leads districts through this, so he does now, and he actually helped lead us through the last RFP. So we've worked with him before, met with the board, and presented the process. During the summer, we put out for RFP, received 8 bids back. Of those 8, 3 were selected for interviews. Got a group of district employees together, both elementary, secondary, athletics, across all employee groups, to have interviews with those 3 finalists. We used a kind of a grading rubric for scoring, a score out of 100 on things like presentation, staffing, support, price. And through that, First Student, our current partner, got the highest score. Price was weighted pretty significantly in the rubric, and First Student had a significantly more cost-effective bid than the next closest bidder. So that was a good part of the decision to move forward with them, or to propose that to you for decision. So they are a current partner, and with that comes both the known, which is good, and not good. So we have had some concerns and challenges. A couple years ago, staffing was a huge concern with canceled routes, delayed routes. That's gotten a lot better. I think that was part of a nationwide staffing shortage for transportation providers. So that's gotten a lot better. We have had some continued communication concerns, both with the community, parents, as well as our schools. So what has First Student done to kind of acknowledge that and move forward. They've done a number of things. So since the final interviews, we've met with both the local management, state management, and regional management, and they've shown a real commitment to the Wausau School District and improving their service for us. They have committed to adding staff, both in the office and in terms of standby drivers. Those staff would be available to help answer phone calls and emails for parents and schools, especially during those high traffic times. They are going to roll out a survey with specific customer service metrics, and that survey will not just be a one-time thing, but will continue to go out, and the goal will be, of course, to improve on those metrics. They're also going to open a direct feedback portal for parents and school members to give direct feedback, and that rolls all the way up through first student management. So we will roll that out. They've done a number of things that I feel like has shown a commitment to the Wausau School District. Any questions on any of this?
No questions, Josh. I just want to add one thing to what you mentioned earlier, that price was obviously a big factor in the decision-making process, but it was not the only factor. And the board had extensive discussion about the service issues that some parents, staff, students have experienced. So this wasn't just a case of we looked at the proposals and said, cheapest one, we're going with that. That was not the case at all. There's a lot of work that has been done and continues to be done that is not necessarily visible to everybody, but rest assured that that is taking place. And that service was something that was a paramount concern, I think, for administration and the board collectively. So thank you for your work on that.
Yeah, thank you. I agree that the board really pushed us to understand the importance of the customer service, and I think First Student has responded. So thank you.
I have one other question, Josh. Since I wasn't at the last meeting, I've been thinking about this a lot. Are buses set up for wireless, and that so the students, when they are on the bus, they're able to work on their devices? Do we have that? Or
I don't
mean
believe-
to hit
no,
you with that question. But
thank
that's
you.
a question
It's a
that
good question.
a lot of bus companies are trying to take care of, because when students are on the bus for a period of time, that'd be 20 minutes, 30 minutes, they can get things done if they have wireless given to them so that they can take care of business with their devices. But I didn't mean to blindside you.
It's certainly something we can look into.
Yeah, I'd be interested in that, knowing the amount of work that I have worked with companies, and that was a big plus for students when they're traveling. Also, I think about the athletes that are taking off for games that are, in our conference is relatively big, and the new conference that Wausau East is in, there's a lot of travel, and consequently, if they don't have time to get their work done during the day, it's nice if they can use their time wisely when they're traveling. So something that maybe we can ask them about.
Certainly, we will ask.
Okay.
Any other questions on this portion? So what would next steps look like? We're going to ask you to approve them as the transportation partner tonight, and then bring the contract forward for you to sign. And that's it.
With that, I'm seeking a motion to approve First Student as the transportation partner beginning with the 2025-2026 school year. Second? Okay. Any questions, any follow-up questions at this point in time?
I have a follow-up on one of the next steps said the shared cost of a customer service staff with a question mark. So I read that to mean it hasn't been decided yet, but can you give us some feedback on whether they were receptive to that?
They were receptive. We're pushing them for it to not be a shared cost model.
Okay.
So,
Because I think having that extra customer service person, just straight customer service, would be very helpful.
so I want to clarify, they were very receptive to adding the person.
Okay, good.
The cost, how that cost will be delineated has not been decided.
Okay.
Just to add to that, to make sure for anybody listening, that shared customer service person one of the things that the board talked about, going back to Pat's point, of not just cost being an issue, was having a dedicated person who could not get called out to take bus route. Because right now, pretty much everybody that they have can get called out. So our hope was that they'd be willing to add somebody whose focus was solely customer service to help our families.
Right. Yeah, the pros and cons of having everyone be CDL licensed.
Are there any other contract parameters that need to be negotiated yet, or are they all set and this is just a matter of putting ink to paper?
There aren't really any other ones that would have to be negotiated. It's pretty much the current contract moving forward. We did put out for a 5-year proposal, so at this point we would be looking for a 5-year contract. That would be the only thing. If we wanted to do a different time frame, we would have to start the proposal over. Of course, we do have the ability, if it's not working for us, to get out of the contract.
Okay, and where did we land on, I know there was discussion about First Student providing us and the public with monthly metrics on, routes successfully delivered, cancellations, missed routes, whatever the case may be. Is that agreed upon as well?
It is agreed upon. I actually have it written here, so thank you for calling it out. It's agreed upon, and they're hoping to get us before the holidays, the one for December, November. So,
Great.
Awesome.
Any other questions? If not, I'm seeking, this is already seeked and already been approved, has been first and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
thank you.
It always blows me away when I have that delay and I sit there thinking, all right, has everybody responded? My fault. All right, continuing on. Agenda item number 10, we're looking at Mr. Ruffers will deliver recommendations from the elementary task force. This item is not for action, but for information. And with that, welcome.
Good evening. Nice to see you all again. And I am here as the messenger of the Citizen Task Force set up to advise you on elementary facilities going forward. And I know there's some task force members behind me, so if you see them at any point rolling their eyes or shaking their heads, you know I've got it wrong, and they can certainly help clarify their recommendation as needed. So I want to talk a little bit about the purpose and need, and the board's familiar with this, but the community, for some in the community, this is probably brand new. So I think going through this is important. So what are the issues we're trying to resolve with this effort? Well, like at present in your elementary schools today, you have 13 of them, and about 1,100 seats are currently empty. Considering the functional capacity of those schools. And we did projections and as part of this work and projected that number would grow to about 1,300 by the year 2027 if there were no changes to your schools. You also have a projected operating deficit by the year 2027 of somewhere between $2 and $3 million that is sort of looming over you. The building infrastructure among those 13 schools is not equal among all of them. You'll hear more about that next week, I believe, but it is aging. And what you'll learn from CISA 10 is that if you summed up all the deferred maintenance needs over the next 10 years, you'd come up with a pretty big number across those 13 buildings. Those factors are driven by a lot of things, not under the district's control, broad demographic changes in our society, relatively limited housing development, smaller family sizes, state and federal policy. You're not alone in dealing with this. La Crosse closing schools, Oshkosh district just closed, Green Bay I think is closing 6. Many smaller urban districts throughout the state are going through the exact same thing as you are. Brief history, you went through a process starting last year to restructure the district. You eventually decided as a board to halt that process and to dial into the elementary schools first. We were hired in February to help with that effort. Part of our advice was to set up a task force to guide the process, and that task force began meeting in June. Who is the task force? We advised a maximum size of 45. I think that worked pretty well to allow a range of people and interests on the task force, but to allow meetings that were workable with meaningful interaction among the groups. And we'll talk a little bit about that interaction. Members applied to the district based on a notice that was sent out and selected in spring of 2024 in trying to fill 3 groups: parents with children in the schools, residents without children in the schools, and elementary educators and support staff. So that comprised our group. We invited other people in the community to follow. Diana did yeoman's work getting the word out, keeping the task force communicated, and populating the webpage, which is still front and center on your district webpage to provide information. And there's a host of information about all the doings of the task force over its 9 meetings there. You approved a charge for the task force back in June. The information on the screen describes that charge. The group is charged with developing, evaluating, and recommending 1 or 2 preferred elementary school facility options, to advise whether the number of elementary schools should be reduced, and if so, how, when, and where. To serve as communicators of the recommendation to others in the community throughout the process, making sure information that was going back and forth was accurate. To prepare a report, which is what we're providing here tonight, and in doing all that, consider student enrollment projections, whether 4K is being organized well and according to a desired facility option going forward. Both the current conditions and the locations of your existing school buildings relative to each other, and other option evaluation criteria that you all approved. So over the course of the summer, we talked about those potential criteria. We brought in August a proposal of 5 different criteria, and those were important to provide a uniform basis to compare different options against each other and to make sure that they were meeting a broad directive approved by the board. Those criteria were fiscal responsibility. That was indicated as the highest priority criterion, which would consider building improvements, staffing, and capital and operational costs relative to the constraints that you all have as a district. Efficiently utilizing the buildings, making sure that current and projected enrollment is reasonably balanced among the elementary schools, not substantially below functional building capacity, but not above capacity as well. Maintaining educational opportunities was another criteria, the extent to which the option provides a full and equal range of educational services to all students across the schools. 4th criteria, minimizing the impact on students. The number of students affected by any changes should be minimized to the extent practical. Except that movements of too small groups among schools should also be minimized. Not sending 5 kids from one school to another and the other 200 to a second school. And then the 5th criteria that was laid out and drilled into the task force over the course of many meetings was to work to keep schools close to students. That elementary building should be close to where concentrations of students live and where students can walk to school safely. So that was the sort of the structure and the basis for the task force work. As mentioned earlier, the task force met over 9 separate meetings. We spent our summer in summer school learning and getting oriented to the task at hand and understanding information about district finances, enrollment, including projected enrollment, how elementary schools are structured, class size policies, and other key aspects that would go into the intelligent development of facility options. In September, the task force reviewed the criteria put before them and came to an agreement on the need to move forward with the consolidation of some elementary schools, and I'll go into that a little bit more in a second. And then over the course of the fall, which I'll go into some more. They pursued and evaluated 10 different facility options, and eventually, just last Wednesday, came forward with a recommendation to you all. As I mentioned, task force met 9 times. We kept them there for a long time, over 23 hours of meeting time. We had, I counted them all up, guys, over 80 small and large group discussions that occurred during those periods. Diana was busy keeping the task force members informed. Members had the ability to ask questions throughout the process. That included 96 that we put in a separate questions and responses document when we couldn't answer the question fully during the meeting. The task force moved to considering general options to close schools, talked about 10 specific individual facility consolidation options at its last meeting, 2 different bundles of those options, and 3 variations to those bundles, and I'll get into that in a little bit more. My point with this slide is that the task force turned over many stones during this work and investigated this from many different angles that related to the 5 criteria. So I'm going to highlight a few meetings and kind of turning points or key points during the process. At the September 11th meeting, the task force members agreed that up to 4 elementary schools ought to be closed based on review of the issue against the criteria. At that point, we didn't have specificity on which schools. We just took the average size school, and all task force members agreed that closing no schools really wasn't a viable option going forward. At the next meeting on September 25th, we started to talk about specific schools, and we asked the task force to vote on which schools were candidates, question marks, or unlikely for potential closure based on a review against those 5 criteria that were laid out. And so the X's you see here on the screen represent individual task force member votes. And the important part of this chart is that we then, starting with the next meeting, identified those schools that were most commonly identified as candidates in the potential consolidation options. And eventually, I should mention, eventually considered all the candidates and question marks. With a little asterisk, the option for Maine closing was not detailed among the 10, but was discussed as part of the meetings. So each option was accompanied by a map that suggested potential attendance area changes, and also what we called a dashboard, which compared the option to the 5 criteria. Fiscal issues, efficient building utilization, comparing enrollment to capacity, identifying the characteristics of the buildings that would remain and potentially close in the option and criteria 3, identifying how many students or what percentage of students in the district would change schools under that option, and finally, under the 5th criterion, sharing some statistics on how close students were to the remaining schools in that closure. And so each of these options was a close one school and shift those students to 1 or 2 other schools. So at the end of the process, there's a lot to grab onto with this slide. The task force, after evaluating all 10 of the options you see here on screen, went through a preference exercise where, after large and small group discussion, task force members had a chance to rank which of these options they felt was their most preferred, if that's the proper word, down to their least preferred by rating them 1 to 10. And like in golf, a lower score is better in this case. And so the options that received the best votes or the lowest votes were Hewitt, Texas to Riverview, Grant to Jefferson, which involved a 4K Academy shift from Jefferson to Lincoln. How was that possible? Because Lincoln students would be going to G.D. Jones under the 3rd highest rated option, with a 4K Academy shifting from Jefferson and G.D. Jones back to that Lincoln building. And then the 4th option that received significant Hawthorne Hills to John Marshall with and Franklin, with basically that attendance area being divided 2/3 to John Marshall and 1/3 to Franklin. In that case, since Hawthorne Hills is another 4K academy with about 30 students, that academy would shift to Riverview in that particular option. So as you can see from the rankings, those did separate themselves from to a fairly significant degree. So at our last meeting, just last Wednesday, our job was to kind of put together those individual options into what we call bundles. It's not just for insurance anymore. It's a collection. The bundles were a grouping of individual elementary school facility consolidated options that may, in combination, meet the criteria. That's how we define them. The board did look at some variations of potential add-ons or substitutions within a bundle. And in the end, one of those variations became an idea for future consideration or implementation beyond the task force primary recommendation. The task force did provide a recommendation on what bundle it thought the board ought to pursue, but also had recommendations on other related matters that came up over the course of its 9 meetings. And we'll talk about those tonight too. So what are those task force recommendations? A lot to unpack on this slide as well. This is a description of the bundles, variations, and the task force voting on those. What you see highlighted in bold type are the two, what I call base bundles. Those ended up receiving the most first and second place votes when individual task force members had the opportunity to rate them. We did have these variations that identified and addressed other ideas that came up during the course of the task force discussions. Ultimately, they did not get significant number of votes, so to speak, as part of that process. So in summary, 71% of the task force members at the last meeting voted that base bundle 1 would be their preferred bundle or variation. And an additional 14% rated it as their second choice, so about 90% total. In addition to that, about half voted bundle 2 as their second most preferred bundle, and an additional 9% as their most preferred. So based on these results, and I'm going to get into the bundles in detail in a second, task force recommends bundle 1 as it's recommended, but with bundle 2 also presented to the board as an alternative. So what is recommended elementary facility option bundle 1? Bundle 1 would, as shown on the map and the text on your screen, shift 100% of Hewitt, Texas students to Riverview Elementary. Would, as I mentioned earlier, shift about 2/3 of Hawthorne Hills current students to John Marshall, and 2/3 to John Marshall, 1/3 to Franklin. The 4K Academy that currently exists at Hawthorne Hills, the smallest in the district, would also shift to Riverview and join their 4K students. And then on the west side of the district, there's a combination of schools that it would be changing function. Lincoln students would shift to G.D. Jones in a 1-to-1 transfer. Grant students would shift to Jefferson in a 1-to-1 transfer. But that's only possible given the capacity of those schools if 4K would leave those schools. And so the idea in this option is that Lincoln would become the district's 4K academy on the west side and serve only that role. Being repurposed. So you would end up with a 4K Academy at Lincoln and a second 4K Academy at Riverview, which would also still serve as an elementary school. Why bundle 1? First, as you saw from that chart earlier, it's comprised of the task force 4 most preferred consolidation options. It provides a comprehensive solution to fill most of those projected 1,300 empty elementary seats in 2027. It closes and repurposes 2 east side schools and 2 west side schools, so geographically viewed as fair, so to speak. And the remaining schools, if you squint and look at them in the district, are fairly regularly spaced throughout the community. 3 of the 4 of those school consolidations are 1-to-1, meaning 100% of the kids would go from one school to a second school. And the schools that were selected as the receiver schools in that option have large populations of students that are already within safe walking distance from those schools. This came up, we talked quite a bit about what schools have and don't have during the process. All schools that would be closed under this option do not currently have separate gym and cafeteria spaces. And all quote unquote receiver schools do have separate gym and cafeteria spaces today. And the district staff evaluated the suitability of the learning spaces across the 13 different schools, and that all receiver schools had at least quote more suitable learning spaces, which was in the middle category. And the bundle, finally, bundle one was selected by the task force based on cost savings it prioritized. This graphic shows, these next several pages show how statistically the option bundle performs against the 5 criteria. Bundle one avoids about $4 million in 10-year maintenance costs through the result of 3 elementary schools that would be closed and brought offline and not having to be therefore improved over that 10-year period. We work closely with staff to identify operating cost reduction, utilities, plowing, things like that, and staff reductions, potential through attrition, normal attrition of staff across the schools. You see the statistics that resulted. So if you wanted to, you could start to compare those to the projected budget deficit in 2024. It's not all gravy. There is a modest state and federal funding impact through AGR. We just learned on Friday after the task force met that there would be a loss of AGR funding due to 71 students that would go from an current AGR school, Hawthorne Hills, to a non-AGR school at Franklin. So that's something to keep in mind. We're learning a little bit more about that. It involves about 4 to 5% of the AGR elementary school students in the district.
Probably going to John Marshall.
John Marshall. Thank you very much for the correction. There would be more bus routes as part of this option. Bundle inevitable. We'd be moving from 13 schools to 9 schools. Their estimate is 6 to 7 additional bus routes. 2 of the schools that would be receiver schools, while they have separate gyms and cafeterias, they don't have AC. Those are Franklin and Marshall. The task force, you'll see later as part of its advice, suggested that those AC that AC be added to those 2 schools, part of the deferred maintenance efforts. And you see the cost of adding that, cost estimates from CISA 10 listed on the bottom of the screen to do that. The second criteria is efficient building utilization. We've talked quite a bit about this, and there's some new information on this one too. Generally speaking, the proposal would utilize 85% of the total functional capacity of the remaining school buildings, including the repurposed Lincoln Elementary School. There's 2 footnotes that are important to keep in mind. Again, a little bit of new information for the task force. G.D. Jones and Jefferson capacities, they would decrease slightly from what you see up on on screen if they served as 5K through 5 schools versus early childhood through 5 schools. District staff is currently working to figure out what that amount is. We believe it will be still feasible to pull off bundle one, but that building capacity number for Jefferson and for G.D. Jones you see there is probably going to change a little bit.
Just to add to that, the reason for that is because you can't take the 4K capacity and just transfer it directly to K5 capacity, because 4K takes less space because they're not there all the time.
Right. You have morning, you have afternoon using the same classroom. And the other point on the flip side is that Lincoln's capacity would increase from what you see there for the same but opposite reasons. The third criteria was how well the bundle compared against the maintaining educational opportunities. This list is the collection of schools that would remain when they were built, when they were last added to or remodeled, how big of site they're on, whether they have a separate gym and cafeteria or AC, and the evaluation of learning space suitability in the final column. So in general, with this list, it's sort of an upgrade of those statistics versus those measures. How many students would be impacted? We had a nice discussion at the task force meeting. At the last meeting, the task force pointed out that we had this at 4K through 5 last week, Wednesday, and said, well, Mark, 4K students wouldn't be moving the next year unless they got repeated in 4K, which hopefully doesn't happen very often. So this statistic is actually showing how many 5K through 5 students would change schools or change attendance areas. So about 20% of your elementary kids under this bundle would change schools. And finally, the fifth criteria is how close are we keeping schools to students. We have statistics commonly shared with each of these options, but these are the affected schools in this bundle 1. And one key stat I point you to is that except for Riverview, which would have a very large attendance area because it would also have Hewitt, Texas's current area, we would have 100% of the kids within 2 miles of the affected school, which, not considering hazardous transportation, is sort of the busing walking zone threshold. The task force wanted to share option bundle 2. Bundle 2 would also close Hewitt, Texas, and send those students to Riverview, and Hawthorne Hills to John Marshall and Franklin in the same arrangement, with 4K Academy consolidated on the east side to Riverview. The difference between Bundle 2 and Bundle 1 is that while Grant would be consolidated, Grant students would go to Jefferson, and a combination of Jefferson and Lincoln rather than just Jefferson as in Bundle 1. The reason being is that there's not enough capacity unless you relocated away from Jefferson to fit all those kids in Jefferson with the current students at that school. So why present Bundle 2? It does represent a more modest incremental solution than Bundle 1, resulting in less change for the community. Fewer students would change schools compared to Bundle 1. We'll talk a little bit about statistics related to both of those. It's not as significant of a shift in the 4K delivery model as is Bundle 1. Hawthorne Hills 4K would relocate, but the other 3 current 4K sites would remain. So the feeling was if the board wasn't on board with the Bundle 1 4K model, that this may serve as a fallback. Otherwise, it has some similar characteristics to Bundle 1, the same separate gym cafeteria benefit. We have reasonable spacing among remaining schools in that option, perhaps not as regular as the first bundle. Still have large populations of walking zone students at the receiver schools and suitable learning spaces that in those schools that would remain. The next 5 slides compare it against the same 5 criteria. I'll try to hit the highlights here. Some of the maintenance costs avoided and operating costs are similar because three schools will be decommissioned in this option, just like the bundle, in this bundle, just like Bundle 1. Because remember, Bundle 1 didn't close Lincoln per se, it converted it or repurposed it to a 4K academy. The annual staff expense reduction in this option, if you were to put the 2 side by side, is less than in Bundle 1. The building utilization statistics are similar. We don't have that 4K Academy consideration that I mentioned with the earlier one, because we are not repurposing Jefferson and G.D. Jones away from serving as 4K academies in this bundle. Educational opportunities, not terribly different from the last one, but here you see that G.D. Jones, Jefferson, and Riverview would still serve as 4K academies within this bundle. Impact on students, you might remember the last option had 20%, or the last bundle had 20% of students changing. This has 14% of the students changing schools. So again, a little less assertive change in attendance. Buildings close to students are very similar because the schools that are remaining open and closing are very similar. So I'm going to anticipate some questions and then certainly open it up to your questions going forward here. So why consolidate 4K academies as is particularly a feature in Bundle 1? And this is per the task force discussions over the course of the discussions with perhaps an exception at the end here. First, it provides space for one-to-one consolidations of Lincoln to G.G. Jones and Grant to Jefferson, which is a primary feature of Bundle 1. It helps to achieve a minimized student change criterion, that criterion number 4. It would provide a West Side 4K Academy in a central accessible location at Lincoln, and that school does have air conditioning and more suitable learning spaces. It doesn't have a separate gym and cafeteria, but that is much less of an issue when you're just dealing with 4K kids than as an elementary school. On the east side, if Hawthorne Hills closes, its 4K Academy program would need to be relocated. That currently has about 30 4K students. It would not be a difficult fit to shift that 4K program over to Riverview, as is a feature in both bundles. And this starts to transition into some operational efficiencies, kind of statistics. It's cost effective. It enhances collaboration opportunities among the 4K staff. It wouldn't need to affect the partnerships that the district has with community partners providing 4K and other related services. So per the task force, why did they talk about closing Hawthorne Hills? First off, it's about half full presently. It's the lowest percentage occupancy school in the district. And within its attendance area, we're projecting declining enrollment. It is at the edge of the district, but its opportunities for new housing development are extremely limited within that attendance area. It does have fewer walkers than John Marshall and most other in-city schools. John Marshall is the primary receiver of the Hawthorne Hills students in that option. It's got one road in and out, which presents challenges. Depending on who you talk to, it's a significant challenge or not that big of a deal. And especially if we were to look at instead, you might have seen an option that shifted kids to Hawthorne Hills. The concern was that concern today would become even more pronounced if we had 100, 150, 200 more kids at Hawthorne Hills. It doesn't have a separate gym and cafeteria space today. Presents some challenges today. That those challenges would grow if instead there was an option that shifted students to Hawthorne Hills instead of away from Hawthorne Hills. And finally, its closure does facilitate the regular spacing of east side schools that would remain, and attendance areas could be drawn up fairly logically. That would continue to allow all students to be within 2 miles of their new schools. So that's the reason or rationale why Hawthorne Hills is a closure recommendation in both bundles. Why close Hewitt, Texas? Again, a feature of both bundles. It has the lowest current student enrollment by far, under 90 kids. That's not projected to change much. Its attendance area is rural with not a lot of additional housing development opportunities or market demand. It's your most remote school. Despite the fact that it's pretty close to DC Everest, it does not have significant open enrollment. from that or other districts. 100% of the students are being bused to Hewitt, Texas. There is no walking zone for that school. It does have higher per student operating costs than most other elementary schools. It's probably connected to the fact that it serves the fewest students. It doesn't have separate gym and cafeteria space and lower space suitability rating than most other buildings in the district. Its low student population means that it's relatively students are relatively portable, so to speak. We would have 90 students to shift, and that could fit into a range of different schools, Riverview being the most proximate that has capacity. And the task force finally did acknowledge and ask questions regularly about what happens to red granite if the building were. I'll leave it that to others to get into in additional detail, but it is certainly a consideration. The case for Grant, why close Grant? Per the task force, Grant doesn't have separate gym or cafeteria spaces. It doesn't have air. Like Hewitt, Texas, it has lower space suitability than most other buildings in the district. It's the oldest school in the district. It's on one of your smallest sites. Enrollment has been declining. That decline is expected to continue. The fact that it has relatively few students and declining means that shifting them to another school in that case, depending on the bundle, either Jefferson or Jefferson and Lincoln. And then its closure facilitates the regular spacing of schools on the west side and logical attendance areas, similar to the Hawthorne Hills closure on the east side. So the task force got into a lot of different topics. I'll say politely, we had to rein them in from time to time because they're very energetic and care a lot about the school district. But they offered these recommendations that they felt, and I agree, related to their charge. First off is there was quite a bit of discussion about potentially a Rib Mountain to South Mountain consolidation. There were two different consolidation options considered that involved Rib Mountain closing during the process. They did not rank among the most highly rated options. We can certainly talk about why. And if we were to pursue, or the district were to pursue a one-to-one consolidation where all students would go from Rib Mountain to South Mountain Elementary, you really couldn't do that without adding a classroom space to South Mountain. And I think many felt that if our job is to look at, capacity issues and how to fill empty seats, to create more empty seats as part of that process seemed a little counterintuitive. South Mountain, in addition, doesn't currently have a separate gym or cafeteria. So if that consolidated option were pursued, that might suggest investing in one. Given all those considerations, what the task force does recommend advises that the district observe enrollment changes over the next several years at both of those schools and consider the potential for consolidation involving these two schools at some point in the future. Another set of options are recommending existing building improvements. You're going to learn a lot more about this next week, but the task force advises that the district addresses many of the deferred maintenance items that are in the CESA 10 elementary facilities assessment as is possible, both at those schools that would receive additional students as a result of consolidation and those students that would continue on with their current attendance area and population base. The task force also advises that the district improve each receiver school that doesn't have air conditioning with air conditioning, and that involves Franklin and John Marshall. And you'll learn more about that and how that could best be accomplished. And clearly it could be most cost effectively accomplished if it was done in combination with other heating and related system improvements at that school that are in the CESA 10 study. The task force recommended attendance area finalization. We mapped, and the task force considered different future geographic attendance areas for each of the remaining schools associated with the consolidation options. This approach helped to verify that they were feasible, that in other words, we could fit students within the associated school. and how well it performed against the school's close to school students' criteria. But I wanted to emphasize throughout the process and to you tonight that those representations of attendance areas were preliminary. They were intended to serve a purpose. Task force members had ideas of, hey, could you shift the attendance area one block north, one block east? The answer was absolutely, but to do so would be kind of go down a rabbit hole at this point in time before it was really necessary to do so. So the task force advises that the board undertake a separate process to finalize new elementary school attendance areas once the board selects a facility bundle and you're moving forward with that bundle. Then there's a grab bag of a couple of other recommendations. The task force advised that the board consider relocating district administrative functions currently here to one of the other remaining facilities, such as a high school or middle school with excess capacity. But during the discussion, the task force didn't necessarily limit the search to just those high school and middle school buildings. And finally, to work with the city and others to maintain a separate park playground at the Grant site to serve the surrounding neighborhood. The feeling was it is a community gathering spot, even if that building is otherwise sold or repurposed, which is a component of both bundles 1 and 2. Finally, just some considerations as we move forward. We're here tonight to hear your questions, gather requests for further information, and respond where possible. We have another meeting scheduled with you all in the community on December 18th. We'll try to answer as many questions tonight, but given the importance of what we've got going on here and the wealth of information, we want to make sure we get answers right rather than get them to you quickly. So if anything we can't answer tonight, we'll get back to you between now and that December 18th meeting.
Mark, can I jump in on that? And
yes,
I'm proposing to the board, if it would be okay, taking into full account this is difficult for families and this is difficult for our students, and I don't want to postpone, but with a few of the wrinkles with the AGR and with the capacity, what I would propose to the board is allow us to get the task force back together one more time, just to make sure that all of their, I can hear the sighs from the back row. And my thought on that is we've committed to them to give them all the factual data that we can possibly to come up with their recommendations. I don't want it to be different and that it doesn't follow through with what the recommendation is. Talking with Mark, we feel comfortable that we can still do what we said we were doing, but it does change the percentage of the building being full. So I guess I'm looking for direction, or if it would be okay with the board for us to postpone the 18th meeting while we try and get the task force back together one more time.
I think that makes sense to me. I think the title funding and the AGR piece is very important. I do have one question, but it might be a Julie question. I'm wondering about the curriculum kind of student success point of view for having a 4K academy that's just 4K versus a 4K5. Is that something you'd be comfortable speaking to?
Sure, like in terms of, does that change the dynamic?
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be one of the core differences between Bundle 1 and Bundle 2. And so I think you guys are our curriculum experts, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on, from a student success standpoint, what your thoughts on those two things are.
Kara Rakowski, of course, would probably have much more detail and value, being our 4K and early childhood coordinator and principal. But from the standpoint of all of our 4K classrooms and our community sites utilize and have training around the same curriculum and resources. So I don't think that there would be a major, or significant negative or positive impact in terms of the curriculum, because they are all utilizing the same curriculum. We provide professional development for that curriculum, and they have kind of unity in implementing that in the classroom. So I think from a space of something like itinerant services and some of the early childhood services and special services that are that we have that impact our 4K and early childhood students, it would create some efficiencies there. You know, having less sites to get to could create some efficiencies. But in terms of curriculum, I wouldn't say that there would be any negative impact for sure.
From like a student success engagement standpoint, any concerns?
No, I think, Kara did a really nice job with, and hopefully the task force members here would say, the benefits of both the academy sites, which, we are thriving and flourishing in right now, as well as the impact of a single and or limited sites. So we would still be maintaining that east and west side site with the bundle option here. But I think, and the task force could probably agree that there are certainly positive experiences in both delivery formats that she went through with the group.
Before we go any further with questions, I'd like to take a moment just to thank so many people for what they've done. This is the first chance for us as board members to be able to thank the 40 plus people that have come together over 25 to 30 hours. And I'm sure you have been putting more thought into that adds on to those hours, plus the fact that you probably have had people calling you because they know who you are and things of that fashion. This has been brutal, and I think I can speak on behalf of the board here that we greatly appreciate what you have done, and I can't say it in any other way than this has been grueling. It's good for the district. It's good that you have volunteered. Mark, it's been a tremendous task for you to bring these people together to get this information. I don't want to keep on rambling about my great appreciation of what you have done, but we have seen that things have to get taken care of. Academically, economically, we're focused, and we need the community to really be involved with what we're talking about. And you are the point of the spear here. And again, I'm just going to say, we greatly appreciate it. You've done a lot of work. I'm looking forward to finalizing some numbers that Kale has talked about to bring you together. Only helps us to get as much data as possible. And before we start talking about this in front of the media, we really want to have you understand we greatly appreciate you. So thank you for the work you have done. Now, if we have further questions, this would be the time.
I was just going to add real quick for Sarah. I believe that we had a number of 4K teachers actually on the task force as well, and they were a big support of moving it to an academy. So that was the push.
Yes.
I have a tailing question on the 4K. Parents of children in the district who had multiple children in elementary school, how did they feel about potentially having 4K in a different location versus their other elementary students?
I don't know if we had anyone on our task force that had that combination. And we did talk about like if there was a family that potentially was closer to, say, Riverview 4K site, that potentially if there was space that they could choose to go to that site versus the other site, just based on proximity, but only if there was room or capacity in those sites.
The other thing to remember is if you have a student at 4K, that child is likely going to daycare. You're already doing 2 drop-offs. That it's not, it's not, it's just a different spot.
Additionally, for all but 4 schools, they're already going to 2 schools because it's only in 4 sites, maybe 5 with Hewitt, Texas. So like I know for me in Rim Mountain, I had to drive mine to G.D. Jones. So if I went a couple more blocks to Lincoln, big deal.
And I think we really hammered the daycare.
Oh, yeah.
Side of that, like inside and out. And we felt very strongly with the partner schools. I think Julie did a great job of talking about the partner schools that they have, whether that be the YMCA, whether that be Montessori, that they do offer those daycares, Wausau Child Care, plus in-home daycares that are located very close. And if you look at the data that was presented by Mark today, in one of the final pages, it does show daycare proximity to those 4Ks. We spent a lot of time trying to understand to help our families with that particular scenario.
Mark, thank you. Your anticipatory questions answered quite a number of the ones I had, but I just wanted to reinforce one thing that Jim said in terms of appreciation. This discussion has been going on for 12, 13, 14 years, Lance. I mean, you were part of one of the original ones. And in my opinion, this is by far the most comprehensive, data-driven information that the board has been presented. That, in my opinion, so far, it doesn't minimize the emotional impact that it will have, depending on whatever decisions are made. But everything that I've heard, feedback-wise, has been that it really is the data and what is in the best interests of the kids long-term that are driving the decisions. It hasn't been an emotional, my school, don't touch it. People have really looked at it from a bigger picture point of view, and I think that is probably one of the biggest differences in this process. I know that we've experienced over the last number of years that this has been done, so thank you for bringing that to fruition. Just a couple points. I know you mentioned that the task force brought up consider Longfellow. What's going on here? I had mentioned that I think early on. I would strongly encourage us to pursue what does that mean. I think that there's a great opportunity to do something different with the folks that are located here and add to the savings for the district long term. The numbers in terms of the savings projections, is that something that CISA 10 is going to be kind of narrowing in on? Because at some point we're going to have to get to a number that we're going to hang our hat on and go to the public and say, we're going to save this. Now we may have to spend X to get there, but we're going to have to at some point.
Yep, they're going to give us a 1 to 2, 2 to 5, 5 to 10 year plan. They don't have any. It's an interesting dynamic because they were tasked with having a parallel assessment to the task force, so they're independent of each other but intertwined, right? So when you look at, as an example, Franklin and John Marshall, they talk a lot about the HVAC work that needs to happen at both of those facilities, but then they'll also say to add air conditioning costs this much more. So that'll all be rolled into one.
Okay. Okay, great. 85% utilization at the elementary schools I think it was bundle 1 was an 85% utilization. That gets really close to the 90%. And for years, that's been the number that has always been talked about is really the sweet spot. You don't want a school to be at 100%, right to the brim. So getting, real close to 90%, I think that's a huge positive.
Yeah, I can comment on that. So it's a little bit of apples to oranges. What both of these bundles would get you to is 85% of 90% capacity. So 85% of functional capacity.
So because we always describe 90% as sort of our goal capacity.
Right.
Because we don't want to be 100%, because then you can't accept one more student. So even this would still leave us quite a bit of room yet to reach our goal, and not 5%. It's more than that. But yeah, it's obviously an improvement.
The only other question I had, and I guess it could be for another time, but this the teen projected enrollment, that one surprises me that it is only projected to go up 24 by 2035. I mean, there are a number of subdivisions planned for that area. It just seems intuitively like it has a potential to being a very family-oriented subdivisions out in that space. I would think it would be more than 24.
There's a lot of things going on, and if it were only those new subdivisions that we were counting and the new kids that come out of those, that number would be greater. But we do have existing developments that currently have a lot of kids, or might have high school kids, that will go through a period of having fewer kids too. So that was, certainly factored into the equation. Also factored in, and it's been, we've talked about this at prior meetings, it's nationwide. Families are not having as many kids as they did before, not nearly. Everyone's got the exception of, my neighbor's got 9. I get it. But the reality is that there are many more families, many more households, I'll say, that are not having kids, and that same household that might have had 3 kids in a prior generation has 1 or 2. That makes a huge difference in enrollment. So yes, definitely new housing growth in the Statine attendance area, in the village of Rib Mountain in particular. But that new growth is being balanced by the realities of family formation. Not to mention a lot of the new housing that's being built is being built for investors and millennials and Gen Zers and other folks throughout the district and nation.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Sure.
I don't want to correct you, Pat, because of the fact that you're accurate with the time, but being the oldest person here, having my children come through, you were with my children, these types of things have been talked about back in the 80s and 90s. And I say that only because of the fact that I'm a history buff, and there's a lot of emotion that goes along with this. And I remember the busing that we were going to be going through in the 80s, busing the kids from John Marshall to Franklin, and my 3 walked to John Marshall. And I remember being one of the parents that stood up and started to, not my school type of thing. So I believe, and I say all of that because I believe we are very concerned about it, as you have been through this process. I'm hoping we can get this information out to everyone else in our community to let them know these are not easy decisions, but they are tough decisions that have to be made, and we can't just simply kick the can down the road as it has been done in the past. And you've heard that term before, and I've heard that term before since I've been back in the community. We've kicked the can down far enough. We need to make some tough decisions. And so with that, again, thank you. You have given us, you asked some questions and answered some questions that I wasn't even thinking about, and you have dealt with that. And so I agree, Pat. There have been a lot of questions answered that we would have asked. We don't have to. You've done that.
Can I throw one more out there for perhaps the next meeting? I know that a community concern always comes up when we talk about making schools bigger, because there's a belief that a bigger school means bigger class sizes, but we know that that's not necessarily the case. And I'm wondering if you can if you have the numbers in front of you and can speak to what these class sizes would look like, or if that's something you can bring to us at our next meeting, that would be great.
I can quickly say that the district, unless the board decides to change your class size policies, the class size policies are not assumed to change in any of these options.
Yeah, it's a really important point. We at one point had a referendum to build a new school and combine 2 schools together. And meeting after meeting, we showed the class sizes were not going up. All our informational meetings, public meetings, we explained class sizes were not changing. It was a 1-to-1 conversion, same number of sections, just all in one school. And then after the referendum failed, we did a survey of the no votes. And one of the biggest reasons for voting no was because they didn't want bigger class sizes.
Yep. And
so it's a really, really common misconception that as many times as possible that we can say it, the better. What you get is you get more consistent class sizes when you have a larger school. So you won't have so many super small class sizes. You won't have so many of those really big class sizes. You'll get more consistent class sizes. But as you said, we have a class size guideline. And in our AGR schools, we have caps at K3. So I just think the more that can be shared, the better. I agree 100%.
Yeah, I agree. And to be transparent, you do have at some of these schools that are half full classes that are sometimes as low as the single digits. And if you do consolidate, those single digit sizes are going to disappear. But that's you're not increasing your policy as to what the max can be.
But we also have the reverse of that too. Sometimes at the smaller schools, we have a class size of 29.
That may be right.
And but there isn't anywhere else to move those kids into. We can't balance it out because we can't afford to divide it in 2. And so you get both of those happen.
I just want to, if I could jump in, my cautious nature in terms of the capacity of the buildings, what my team is doing right now is we're building mapping. So we're going into each of the buildings that are proposed and putting what the student population would be into that to make sure that there is space for that. As an example, if you have say a medically fragile classroom that's going to have capacity for 2 students, if you have several of those, it really changes what your school looks like. So we're going in to do that with each of the schools to make sure that it has room and capacity. But I want to throw that out as just a cautionary tale as well.
That was going to be one of my requests, because it's one thing to see, here's the number of students in this school, here's the capacity, but it'd be really helpful for us to see the actual classes. There'll be, and I know it changes every year, but if we use next year as an example, there'll be, this many first grade sections, and here are the rooms. So what I don't want to do is say there's the capacity, and then we find out afterwards that, oh yeah, we had to take away the science room, and we had to take away this room, we had to take away this room, and now, this is on a cart because we had to take away this, so that we could actually see not the numbers, but how it actually works in the building would be really helpful.
So going back to the proposal, you're looking at bringing the group together one more time. You kind of summarize it as bring the group together one more time. That would be when? Before Christmas?
We were actually, we'd have to survey in respect of the folks in the task force. We would hope as soon as we could that it would be before the holiday break, and that we could convene for a special meeting with the community input as well shortly thereafter. And again, I say that knowing that families are waiting for this decision and hanging on it. I don't want to put them in a bad place, but I also say that this is too big of a decision for us not to be sure about things. So we would reach out to the task force folks to see what works best for them, and then we would communicate as well to the community to say this is what our plan is moving forward, to make sure we're doing our due diligence on things as well.
Mark, off the top of your head, what would you say the possibility would be bringing the group together again to finalize some of these numbers so that we have some sort of an idea when we would be coming together to have this information? Because obviously we're looking at not having the meeting on the 18th. We'll have our normal meeting, our ad hoc meeting on Monday, but not the Wednesday meeting, if I'm not reading that correctly.
Correct, yeah.
We're very happy to help with that. As I mentioned to Kale before this meeting, we just want to be sure that we've got the numbers right, so we don't go to an 11th meeting with the task force. So the mapping exercise, we learned Friday there would be an AGR impact. It would be nice to understand, a scale of what that impact is. We think it's relatively small, but I don't think we have that answer yet. And we'll comb through the rest of the information in that time, between now and when we meet. But that could happen soon.
Yeah, I think a major question that needs to get answered, and that we fielded is timeline more so than anything else, is that are we looking for next year that it would happen, or is it 2 years from now that we're looking at it? So, and I don't know that the board's in a position to make a decision on that right now, but if our projection is that we're going to be 26, 27, it gives us some time to make a decision and then plan for what does it look like through this year into next year. It gives families some lead time as well to say, oh, okay, I'll take a deep breath, let's get a staffing plan in place. But I think what I hear from people is it's the timeline that's concerning specifically families and staff.
This does not need a motion or anything like that at this point in time, because this was informational to begin with. So consequently, if you could hammer this out with Mark and figure this timeline with our committee, and it'd be nice to have it done before Christmas, but I think that could be pretty difficult to get done at this point in time with the timeline moving so fast. But I think that would be the best thing as I'm looking at board members and seeing heads nod. We want to have all the information we can get before we make a decision. Any comment from the board on that?
No, Jim, I agree with you on what you're suggesting as timeline. I'm very very happy with the amount of work and the viewpoints that have been put into this, completely separate from everyone else. And so I think it's great data and it's great recommendations in how they came up with it. My question is would the timeline fit into our other discussion about the potential of the operational referendum? Because in my mind, if the board decides to do some consolidation, then that possibly changes those, well, it will change the financial projections that Josh would come up with of how our financial picture looks based upon implementation at all or when it's implemented, and what our shortfalls and what that timeline would be as well then. It might get too tight because we need to make sure that we're going through the steps and have each thing in line and worry about one thing at a time.
Yeah, I know
Absolutely.
that with our original discussion at the start of this year, it was like it was mid-January was kind of the drop dead date for us, so we had to make a decision. If we decide to move consolidation to 26, 27, it's not quite as tight of a timeline because now we have the following year in order to make some of those decisions as we plan forward. In terms of an operating referendum, I think we'll probably have some needs either way that we're gonna have to bring in front of the board. Looking at programming, not so much in terms of a capitals question is what I would say. So timeline kind of dictates that, I would say a little bit, that if we say, boy, the board tells administration, give us a good plan, you've got until, semester of next year to come up with what that plan looks like. It puts us it gives us a little bit more breathing room in order to say this is what it looks like, and then capital is not so important. If we really feel the push to say we want to look for next year, then there's some of that potential. I would suggest or recommend that if that's something that the board considers, we would phase it and say which is the easiest consolidation to make, and then move on from that and have a phase process where next year it's maybe the easiest of the consolidation. Year after that, it could be the other two. So
I think on the timeline, this will make some people mad, but I don't think there's a great advantage to pushing it way off unless you tell me from a planning standpoint it's needed. To make a decision and then have that be this thing that sits out there for 2 years or 3 years that's constantly, sometimes I think you're better off just addressing it and doing it, making the tough decision and moving forward rather than having this just sitting out there as a big issue overhanging everything. Now, of course, if you have a student in a school that only has one more year left, they would hope we'd push it off a year, but then the fourth graders would hope we'd push it off 2 years, and the third graders would hope we'd push it off 3 years. And so there is never going to be a time that it's not going to affect the current fifth graders, like no matter what. And so you substitute one family being upset for a different set the next year. It affects the same number of people. We'd of course have to start talking about grandfathering and that kind of thing. But if we can do it from a planning standpoint, I don't think there's an advantage to having it sometime way in the future.
And I don't want to speak for Tabitha in terms of the planning purposes would be the challenges that we have, because there's going to be a point where we have to let staff know where that's going to be and how do we come up with the staffing plan between now and that date that makes sense and is meaningful so I think that would make it really difficult. One of the discussion points that we've had is if consolidation would begin 26, 27, do you use next year as a voluntary move if families choose to? So as an example, you wouldn't want a student to start kindergarten at a school that's going to consolidate, so you just say, all right, as a kindergarten, why don't you go ahead and start at the new school if you want to, or if families want to make the move earlier, do you allow that to happen? So we've talked about those things a little bit. But I too, the challenges of if you don't make the plan for 2 years, what happens between now and then that makes you reconsider the change.
And if you allow some of those voluntary moves, but you haven't taken out the 4K, you now don't have the space to add. To do it. It can be. I can be easily convinced that we need to wait. If you tell me you need it for planning, I don't know that. You guys are the experts on staffing and that kind of thing. So you would tell me that. From a board perspective, as a board member, I don't think it would benefit us to have it sitting here for 2 or 3 years. From the community standpoint, I don't think it would benefit the community to have it sitting there for 2 or 3 years. But certainly if from a staffing and otherwise planning standpoint it's needed, then just, I'll take that advice.
I think there's a lot of head nodding, and I'm seeing that, and I think you hit that on the head. But you have a comment. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I feel like most of us are sitting here saying December 18th would be fine if we can get the data together. by that day. Many of us were planning on going to that board meeting anyway, that might just be a natural progression. And then I don't know how much, if any, if that really affects a ton, other than maybe 2 weeks. I don't know how much 2 weeks cost things, and I don't know what all the calculations take. I'll offer my time.
I have them almost done.
Okay, so there, and it sounds like it's somewhat of a, like, we think it's gonna work, so like, I don't know, I kind of feel like maybe we're still okay, but maybe not.
I think the two groups can get together and make some decisions on that. Otherwise, we're going to be just popping some comments back and forth here. I think you can take care of that. I think we need to get that information. I think we can summarize by saying that. I would say let's move on and get that going, and you've got your mission identified for you.
I just have one comment. I would have to agree with Lance at this point. Watching this group come together and watch where the process started, and then the aha moment. Like, it was amazing to be in the room and to watch the aha moment. Probably early September, definitely late September.
Well, it started with that's my school, and then it turned very quickly into that's my district.
To watch that change and to watch the culture change in that meeting, and to watch people walk out who didn't know each other, to have conversation, to be on the same place, I would hate to lose that momentum. And we talked about ripping the Band-Aid off. Like, the problem with the district in the past may have been that we didn't do that, right? Mark has been a wonderful leader. I mean, the examples that they have given us have been thought-provoking. And I'm just afraid that if we wait, we will have lost what we just gained. And it was an aha moment. I mean, when people understood that this was the future of our district and where we want to be and how we're going to get there, we need to go now. We just don't have the time to wait anymore. We have to go forward.
I appreciate your comment. And after being away for 20-some years and doing other things in administration, and to come back to where my children have been educated here and had taught for so many years, I kept on thinking things have to change, and nothing had changed up to that point in time. And I think you just hit the nail on the head. We don't want to lose the momentum. We don't want to lose that. This board has gone through a lot in the last few years. I think we need to make some decisions based on the community and what you have to offer. I think we need to move, and I'd hate to lose that momentum as well. Pat? Finalize?
Is now the right time to bring up high school consolidation, or
can we escort you out, please?
Kidding. I couldn't let that one go.
Okay. We'll take care of this right now, and the group knows what they have to do. So let's move on. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate it. Okay. All right, next agenda item, 10B, if I'm not mistaken, at the Ed Ops Committee meeting, it was a presentation given by Michelle and Principal Rakowski. Is there anything else that you need to add to that? If not, Julie, I will move on. I'm seeking a motion to approve the program agreements with the listed community partner sites for the 2025-2026 school year.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. All right, continuing on. I have a quick comment, requested for, that's not yet. We've got other things going on. That's what happens when I have too many pieces of paper in front of me. Okay. Here I am. Got to get back into my routine after being gone. Sorry about that, people, but that's just a part of being out of sync. All right, professional growth and development. This is where I wanted to make a comment, and to the board. I want to thank you for the opportunity to cover for when I've been gone. In the last 7 months, I have traveled a lot. I have seen a lot around the country, 20 different states. I've been to Europe and have been to Brazil, and I was given that opportunity because of the fact that you allowed me to leave so many times. And to Mr. Trollope for running everything as I was gone, I greatly appreciate it. But being an educator for over 40-some years, I will say this. People need to realize, for young people's sake, that learning doesn't always take place in a classroom, but learning does take place when you meet people face to face. Getting to know people on my travels has given me a great opportunity to change perspective and to understand that there's a lot of things going on, but it does come down to individuals and understanding people. And it was a great opportunity for me to be able to do that traveling, and I greatly appreciated that. So is there any other added growth items that you would like to share with us? Anything from the different opportunities? I saw that you had taken some courses online, Mr. Trollope. Anything to add, or?
I would just encourage others to make use of that same WSB learning seminars online. It's quite easy. You can do it from home, and they're great.
The learning platform is there for all of you to take advantage of. Legislative liaison, Mr. Sillers, do you have
There's nothing. Both parties have elected their leaders for the next session, starting, I think, January 2nd or 3rd, or it'll be the next Monday after that. The only election that is coming up is in April, and one of those would be Supreme Court, State Supreme Court. One of the candidates is at a gathering this evening that I'm going to go try to talk to them and then speak with Representative Snyder to see how he feels, if there's any feeling on how the budget might be looking. Very preliminary at this point, obviously, to see what might be happening for school funding. But that's all.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Mr. Bushman, anything to deliver?
The only comment I would make is, and I've said this several times to the task force, a sincere thank you for their time and effort. It was fun to be around a group of people who are truly committed to the betterment of our district, to our students, and it was clear that this group certainly was. So it was a great process, lengthy. They committed a lot of time, and I thank them for that. And I also would thank Mark for his work that he's done with us and has been a great facilitator for us.
And I think we could all concur by saying thank you very much. Greatly appreciate it. With that, I'd reference the board liaison paperwork to be put into the official record. And with that, I'm requesting for a closed session according to state statutes, evaluation of interim superintendent of schools, 19.851C. I would need a motion. And I would need a roll call.
Motion to go into closed.
Okay. All in favor?
Roll call.
Aye. Oh,
Roll call first. Okay.
Sarah Brock? Sorry, John, you can't vote for this. Pat McKee?
Yes.
Jennifer Paoli? Sorry, Joanna, you are not allowed to vote for this. Jane Roosh? Corey Sillers?
Yes.
Lance Trollope?
Yes.
Jim Boucher?
Yes. Thank you very much.